Hi, good morning, everyone. We'll just give a couple of minutes for everyone to join the call. So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. My name is Samakhya. Sangya, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Sangya. Good morning, everyone.
On behalf of the students at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, we would like to welcome you to day 2 of the 13th Michigan India Conference. This conference began from an idea originated by Dr. C.K. Prahlad and Dr. M.S. Krishnan at the university in 2009. On day 1, we heard our eminent speakers sharing motivating thoughts about how India could grow in the next couple of years. Our distinguished speakers included Padma Bhushan recipient and former chief of the New Development Bank of BRICS countries, Mr. K.V. Kamath, and chief economic advisor to the government of India, Mr. Anantha Nageshwaran. And our panelists, Mr. Gopal Srinivasan, Mr. Narayan Ramchandran, and Professor M.S. Krishnan. They shared their perspective on diverse themes like business strategies, innovation, economic development, and Lake C.K. Prahlad's vision of India at 75. Today, we are moving on to the second day of the conference, and we are delighted to host our guest for the day.
Our theme for today is Digital India, Startups and Entrepreneurship. Without further ado, let's welcome our first speaker, Mr. Jimmy Soni. He's an American award-winning author and former managing editor of the Huffington Post. He is best known for his work, A Mind at Play, his award-winning biography of Claude Shannon, and his recent biography, The Founders. It is the story of PayPal and the entrepreneurs who shaped the Silicon Valley. The British Society of Mathematics awarded Mr. Soni their 2017 Newman Prize for A Mind at Play. Welcome to the conference, Mr. Soni.
Joining us on the fire chat, welcome, Jimmy. Joining us on the fire chat, we have our co-chairs, Suman Chakravarti and Anviti Shastri. Suman is the Senior Director at Universal Music Group, leading the technology strategy and digital transformation. And Anviti is the Director at Guidehouse, leading custom technology products. Now, I would like to hand over the conference to these very accomplished individuals who are driving innovation at its core across industries.
Thank you, Samakhya and Sangha, and welcome, Jimmy. Congratulations on your book, The Founders. It was, in fact, such a gripping book. How did you come up with the whole idea of writing this book?
Yeah, it's a great question, and thank you for having me. And it didn't strike me until just now that, in a funny way, life kind of comes full circle and stories come full circle. And the funny thing about speaking to an audience that's affiliated with the University of Michigan is that my last book was about Claude Shannon, who is actually an alumnus of the University of Michigan. And so this feels like coming full circle because I actually did a talk in Ann Arbor when that book launched. And now I'm doing a virtual talk about this new book and some of the themes from it. So it does feel like a bit of a homecoming in some ways. So I appreciate the chance to chat and to chat about the book. Just for a bit of background, The founders is the origin story of PayPal. So I think many on this Zoom and no matter really what sort of time zone or country you're in, you've probably used PayPal or Venmo, one of its the properties it owns. I had this funny experience of when I wrote about Claude Shannon, a proud Wolverine. I was studying Bell Labs where he worked, and so I looked at like the cluster of talent at Bell Laboratories in the United States in the 20th century, and started to think about what are kind of the other clusters of talent, where not one breakthrough individual, but groups of people. And Bell Labs, I mean, they had invented the transistor, they invented touch-tone dialing, they won several Nobel Prizes. So I just started thinking, like, what are other clusters? And I looked at clusters like General Magic. I looked at clusters like Fairchild Semiconductor, Xerox PARC, these kind of iconic American clusters that were Silicon Valley based. And then I kind of fast forwarded in that history and I came across PayPal. And I think PayPal, especially in the last, I would say 48 hours, they have the people who are alumni of this company have an outsized effect in the world. They're often colloquially known as the PayPal Mafia. They include people like the founders of YouTube, the founder of SpaceX, people like Peter Thiel, Reid Hoffman, David Sachs, Max Levchin, Elon Musk, and hundreds of others who are affiliated with this company and went on to have gone on to do all these incredible things. And, as the last 2 days shows, are still doing things in the world that are of consequence. I was maybe the only person who asked myself the question, or maybe one of the only people, well, all of this is great, rockets and electric cars and data and all the rest, but what happened at PayPal between 1998 and 2002? And to me, it's an interesting question because, I think for many of us, like the jobs we take just after college, or maybe like one or two jobs just after college, are the ones that leave a profound imprint. They can shape our lives for the rest of our lives, right? It's sort of that the compass needle points in one direction and then you go in that direction. For the hundreds of people that worked at PayPal, that was indisputably true, that it shaped their formative professional years in most cases, between the age of like 20 and 35, right? For particularly for the earliest employees. And I just wanted to know what happened. I sort of said to myself, like, there's all this endless, breathless coverage about Tesla or about LinkedIn or about the things that they've done since, but what actually were they doing when things were less certain, when the whole internet ecosystem was still, in the dial-up internet phase, when the dot-com bubble burst in 2000. And I just didn't find a book that satisfied those answers. And so I decided to go and write one. And I had the fortune of interviewing over 5.5 years. I interviewed more than 250 people, including all of the people I just named. And so I think I caught them at exactly the right time in their lives because they were open to speaking about this. I think if I were talking about other topics, they might be less open. But when it came to PayPal, it was 20 years had gone by. And I was able to have lengthy conversations with them about what that company was, what it meant to them, and how it was created.
Yeah, it's fascinating to hear from you. And I'm sure like you spend a lot of time with all these founders like Elon Musk and everyone. And the book is doing really good. I read in New York Times the whole review about your book. So again, congratulations for the book.
Well, thank you.
Really excited. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. It's been interesting. I think again, there's this theory that authors have when they're in the middle of a book that they think they can control how people are going to read it, and that's just not true. Like you write a book and it goes out into the world, and people will take from it what they want to take from it, right? And sometimes they'll notice all the clever jokes that you put in, and sometimes they completely miss the things you did, right? It's really funny because I buried an elaborate secret code inside the book, and there's only been a couple of people who have actually deciphered it and figured it out and written to me, right? And so you spend, like I spent endless hours creating a secret code, and then I put it in the book, and that gets, you know, it's crickets, but people love some of the other things that I put in there. And I'm glad for the reception. I think that, you know, I have a theory about why it's been well received in some ways, and that is that creative acts have kind of energy, they have inspiration, right? So founding anything, right? Founding a conference or a university or a company or writing a book, like they have energy and ambition and uncertainty, and these are common themes, right, in any venture. And it seems to me that one of my friends who is a startup founder, he read the book and he said, you know, the most comforting thing about this book is to know that they had the same anxiety that I have, that every day, you know, Peter Thiel lived with the same anxiety that I live with now about the possibility of failure. He's like, that's actually he's like, this book is basically therapy for me because it means I'm okay.
Yeah, completely. We can connect with that book. I'm going through the book right now. I'm reading, and every page brings such a enormous, like it clearly shows the research you have done, the whole background, all the informations. It's fascinating.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point, Jimmy. You know, when you were saying that there's some common themes and people can associate and relate with that emotion of the founder at so many different stages of their entrepreneurship journey. In fact, like if you think about our world, our economy, it's just become a global economy at this point, and there are entrepreneurs and ventures and exciting teams and exciting companies that are budding all over the globe. So in your research, what were some of the similarities and differences in the entrepreneurship journey that you found, like say across the globe?
Yeah, I have an answer, but my answer carries a bit of a disclaimer, right? Which is, I think there are people who study innovation at the 10,000 foot level, who look at kind of where venture capital is flowing, right? Or you know, what are the number of unicorns that have been minted in a particular country? My book is really not that. It's not a global look at innovation. What I did was I drilled very deeply into this one specific company that produced all of these future entrepreneurs, right? So that's kind of one key disclaimer is, you know, sort of like I'm not offering a prescription so much as I'm offering a description. Like what I did was I went and interviewed all of the people who founded this company and kind of tried to piece together, like, how did this come to be, right? But I think that there are common features, and I don't think that. I know that because what's interesting about the entrepreneurial journeys of the people who created PayPal is that they repeated themselves, right? So when I here's a classic example, actually. Instead of speaking in abstractions, let me use an example. People today see PayPal everywhere, right? You can go on most websites, and if it's a payment system or service, you could probably find a way to use PayPal or one of its affiliated entities. And that ubiquity is part of the power. If you can use a payment system everywhere, then it kind of becomes a part of what you do. You will sign up for an account because it's acceptable everywhere. Interestingly, that ubiquity was not an accident. Making PayPal appear everywhere was the byproduct of designing very, very good buttons, you know, in 1999 and 2000 and 2001 that could be used everywhere, meaning like one website should function just as well as another. One country should function just as well as another. How do you do that? That's actually a technical and intellectual, but also a financial challenge. It's a regulatory challenge. What does it mean to have a PayPal button in the UK? It's different than having it in the United States. It's different than having it in Japan, right? The language is different. Everything's different. So that was a challenge. How do you make the button appear everywhere? But then it's also central to the company's success. Once PayPal is everywhere, it is successful. A few years after PayPal, these 3 PayPal alumni start to work on a little website or a little project called YouTube. all of us have used YouTube, I'm sure. And in fact, I actually imagine that number is probably close to 100% of people listening have used YouTube, which is interesting. One of the challenges that they had to face is, how do we get this player, this YouTube player, how do we make it so that it's embeddable everywhere, right? How do we actually make that possible? That's not a natural function for a lot of websites, allowing this third-party video player to appear on all these websites. And they had learned the lessons about how to make that happen from PayPal. So the story that I remember that someone shared with me is, at one point people were using this website called MySpace, and a few of MySpace's users had begun embedding YouTube videos into MySpace just as a way of showcasing whatever they were doing. And MySpace got mad and kind of blocked the YouTube player, right? PayPal had had the same experience. Websites would block PayPal if they didn't want it. And what PayPal would do is it would tell the users to call the website and complain, like make a big fuss and PayPal will be reinstated. The YouTube founders did almost the exact same thing. They had MySpace users call MySpace corporate, make a big fuss, and YouTube was reinstated. And this example repeats itself in big and small ways throughout the kind of history of this early company. And it's a direct kind of like line of sight back to PayPal. Now, the broader lesson there is that we tend to think of innovation as like one big idea, right? The sort of apple falls from the tree, it hits you on the head, and you build a company. What I discovered in the process of writing PayPal, and this will be sort of obvious to the people who are listening who are entrepreneurs, but it's not obvious to somebody who is coming at this from the outside, is that innovation often is around the world is a series of very micro problem solving matters, right? So it's actually sort of like unlocking different puzzles, and you sort of get the right answer with each puzzle. It's not having the right idea so much as it is knowing that you have the wrong idea and then working your way back to something that's adding value for users. And that's a big part of the PayPal story. Is it's not like PayPal was the first company on the block to discover emailing payments, or to discover payments in general, or to discover digital payments, but they had to solve dozens of sort of discrete micro challenges to figure their way to something that added value. I actually take a lot of comfort in knowing that, because it means you don't have to be a super genius to be an entrepreneur. What you actually need to do is identify a problem and then identify the solution, and then know that you're just going to face problem after problem after problem. And the point is to very quickly and flexibly solve each of those problems. And I think of that as actually the key for the PayPal book. I had this interview with a gentleman Jack Selby, who was I think he was employee 13 at PayPal. And Jack said to me, even before we started the interview, he was very skeptical. And he looked at me and said, if you are writing this book as a story of success, you have the wrong story. He said, actually, what this story is it's a story of near failure followed by near failure followed by near failure. And that to me is actually like one of the lessons that I think I take away from this, which is worldwide, no matter what kind of company you're trying to build, you're essentially signing up for a sequence of problem solving. But in some ways, like accepting that and appreciating it, like orients the way you approach that work.
That's so nice way of explaining, and I'm sure like all the startup owner or who is thinking about starting a startup, it will be very helpful. Couple of us who have started our startup in University of Michigan, we go through this cycle almost every day. And when I started reading your book, Jimmy, like that was giving us that commonality, and it's inspiring. We started thinking like, oh, it's not only me, or it's not only us. Everyone went through the same cycle. Now in Bangalore, in India, they're saying every minute there are 4 startups coming up in India, and it's a new trend. India is almost becoming the startup hub for the world. But last week we were discussing with Microsoft India CFO, and one of the things Rekha was mentioning, like all these startups are coming up, but there is no such like what they need is more guidance, the way they should build the startup, the references, because there is no such startup school anywhere where people can go and learn how to do a startup. So from your research, what are the common or what are the solutions you see which is there cannot be a perfect recipe for any startup, but what are the solutions you see all startups should think of while they are starting or they are building?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I actually think we could do a whole day just on that specific question. And it's funny because one of the things that in my first interview with Peter Thiel, he cautioned me against writing a book that was a how-to book. He said, he basically sort of was a little suspicious and said, you can't write this book as kind of 10 steps to building your own PayPal, because that's impossible, right? And part of what he was identifying is that startups are of the moment. They are trying to solve a problem that they see, that they identify, that they can fix, but there's not a kind of generalizable playbook for that particular kind of fixing. And so it seems to me that there's sort of no way to sort of do a startup school per se, right? But I think there's a couple things that can help all startup founders that have certainly emerged in my research in my book. I would say one specific thing is that there's people tend to look at Silicon Valley and have a certain archetype of the kind of person that is going to build a startup. What I discovered in my work is that, in fact, like, startups are heterogeneous places. They're not homogeneous places. Like, there are countless people in my story that you know about who are in the news every day, and then there are hundreds of people that are not, right? And I was lucky to be able to interview those people as well. But I think that one important kind of rule of thumb is to not think that it is a 23-year-old college drop or 21-year-old college dropout engineer that's going to build the next unicorn, right? That in some ways, like, if you're hiring or if you're building a startup, actually you want a lot of heterogeneity on your team. And I found that to be a great source of strength in the PayPal story. There were people who had graduated law school. There were people who had finished up business school. There were people I interviewed 2 people who dropped out of high school, right? So there was a wide educational range. There were people who were in their early 20s. There were also people in their 40s and 50s. There was a wide age range. There was gender diversity. And what I discovered is that in each case, the past experiences that those people had, or the inexperience, was a real asset to the organization. I can give you a specific example. There's a woman I didn't have the chance to interview because she passed away, but her name was Joanne Rockhauer. Joanne had a specific expertise, which was understanding eBay users, because she was a big eBay user. She was older than most of the people in the room at PayPal, but she was instrumental in PayPal's success on eBay, which is the first place that it really takes off as a payment system. And there's no universe in which Max Levchin or Elon Musk was going to have as much knowledge about eBay and eBay's users as Joanne Rockhauer, because she was a user, right? Now, Joanne would not fit the kind of archetype of like someone who's going to make the cover of a magazine for being a startup founder, but she was critical to the success of PayPal early on. And so I think that's one thing, is like, let's break some of the myths of who develops startups and how you hire, because I actually think it's far more heterogeneous than people think. The sort of second thought that comes to mind in response to your question is, it's amazing what you can learn from stories and from YouTube videos and from other resources. So there are great books that have been written about Amazon's formation, or about eBay's formation, right? Or about Apple. And there's not going to be like the same, it's not like they have some secret code, right? There's not something buried, except my book, but in a different way. There's not some uniform like theory or management practice, but you can discover little things that might apply in your situation. Here's a specific example. One of the things I discovered in PayPal is David Sachs put an emphasis on small teams, meaning teams of one designer, one engineer, and one product strategist person, right? Producer is what they call them, a product strategist, product manager. And he believed that small teams could more flexibly kind of solve problems throughout the organization. Now, is that some grand insight? No. But what I have in the book and what other books have is the kind of stories and architecture around those events and moments. And that might help someone who is at a startup and maybe it's gotten to be 50 or 100 people, and they're suddenly realizing like we're moving a little bit more slowly than when, than at a different time. And you could apply that lesson and build a smaller team or build a series of smaller teams as a result. So I wouldn't necessarily say that there's some, 2-semester course you could take to be the perfect startup founder. But all of the people that I met and interviewed read very widely about business and about life and about psychology. And that actually sort of brings me to my third point, which I kind of only came to after the fact, like sort of after interviewing Max Levchin for many years and spending time thinking about him and his life. One of the talks he gave recently, he said that his reading as he's become, now he's the CEO of a firm, this is like third or fourth startup, maybe even the ninth, depending on, where we're starting the counting. He says that one of the things that he realizes is that he's not going to win by being a better engineer these days. He's going to win by being a founder and a CEO. And so he spends a lot of time reading books about human psychology, right? Because ultimately what he's leading is a group of people toward a goal. And that requires like some, engineering rigor, but also a lot of like emotional intelligence and figuring out what people's motivations are and how do you recruit the best people. And so I would say that if you're gonna go in any direction, maybe the best thing to do is to try to understand people, right? So that especially if you're the founder, you are trying to recruit people and create incentives for them to do their best work, right, at your organization. And so that is part of what I think can be helpful. There is no playbook, but it's also wrong, I think, to say that like you can't learn by watching like huge numbers of YouTube videos and reading huge numbers of books, if only because all of the people that I interviewed did exactly that, right? They were doing that when they were getting their start. And there's this amazing anecdote in the book of someone who walks into Elon's bedroom at one point and says the room was just packed with books. Like it was just stacks of books, right? And the first book he saw was a book about Richard Branson. And later it dawned on this person, he's like, Elon was studying. This was what he was studying. He was studying entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship.
That's a very, very, very nice and detailed answer. And I'm sure like when I was reading your book, there are a couple of very nice reference and examples. And as you said, like there are YouTube's videos and there are other resources available and reading and learning. There is no end to learn every day, right? So yeah, that's a very nice answer.
Yeah, and totally agree with the part where, diversity drives innovation, diversity drives brainstorming, diversity drives so much, like to have that diversity of thought and backgrounds and experiences. So I think that's something that whether it's entrepreneurship or somebody working in an organization, building a team, doing anything, to that point could really take away and, take back to their life and say, how do I, get a better team, get a product, get a better company and division going. Diversity, that's going to drive a lot of that. So thank you for bringing that up, Jimmy. Talking about going back to the entrepreneurship journey, one of the critical things that a lot of entrepreneurs think a lot about and spend a lot of time in the phase of determining a product market fit. They think about, what's the right market, what's the segment. One is, what do I start with? Where do I expand out? What would that journey look like? And agree, they pivot along the way, but any learnings that you could share with entrepreneurs as they start thinking about that, or they spending enough time in that space?
Yes, it's probably the thing I spent the most time thinking about in the book. And the reason is not because I have an opinion about it, but because other people in the organization would share with me that the lesson that they took from their PayPal experience was thinking very rigorously, particularly about product distribution and about product market fit. So let me sort of share the story because it illustrates the point. When PayPal is first launched, one of the things that happens is they think they have their use case, which is when the PayPal product first launches, it's a way for people who use Palm Pilots, which are these like ancient iPhones, right? It's a way for people to beam money between Palm Pilots. And this is their use case in their mind. Anviti, you and I go to lunch together. I cover the bill. You take your Palm Pilot out. I take my Palm Pilot out and you beam me $10 for lunch, right?
I
That's what
had
they
one. I had one. I hate
There
to
you go.
I
Yeah,
had one.
I had one too, and now they're in museums, which makes me feel, it's like
I
there are times when you suddenly realize that you're old, and I'm like, oh my
yes.
God, this is what happened to me. So they think beaming money between Palm Pilots is going to be the central use case for their product. And they're so excited about this that even when they present to venture capitalists, one of the venture capitalists who invested in them said they were so excited about the beaming that we used to jokingly call them the beamers, that they were the beamers, because they would just come in and beam, beam, beam all day long. Fast forward 5 months, 6 months later, all of a sudden, PayPal customer service gets a request from an eBay user. And the eBay user says, hi, I use your service PayPal. Could you help me resize your logo and make it clickable so that my auction buyers can use PayPal to pay me? And like the team is like, wait, what? So they go on ebay.com and they type in PayPal into the search bar. And David Sachs still recalls this moment very vividly, very vividly. He says, all of a sudden, all of these auction listings pop into view, and all of these people have been using PayPal to pay for auctions on eBay. We never thought, like we didn't even want, this wasn't a use case for us. Once they discover that they've had success there, they're in a very curious situation. They had a use case, they had a plan for how their product was going to be used, but they've discovered that actually the thing that they're adding value, the place where they're adding value in the world is on eBay. And they do, at first, Max Levchin actually tries to block that use. He like blocks the IP addresses for eBay users or whatever so that they can't use the product. But very quickly, the company and the team and even the board say, wait a minute, this is product market fit. Like we have a group of users who are so passionate about this product that they're emailing us to make improvements about it and they're using it. That's when the organization flips and they become a gigantic learning institution about eBay. They obsess over eBay. David Sachs tells, there's this great story that was shared with me. He tells his team, go buy things on eBay. Like they weren't even buying and selling this. He says, go buy things on eBay and study every part of the process. There's a woman named Denise Aptekar who I interviewed, who is a part of the product team. And she said, so he tells us to go buy something. And she's like, I went and bought a landline phone, like a wired phone. And it came and it was caked in cigarette smoke. And she's like, I've never forgotten that phone because it was my first purchase on eBay. And they become obsessive. They study every part of the payments process. They study every part of the selling process. People at PayPal actually become eBay sellers. They buy 1,000 desk grommets and they start to sell desk grommets, not because they need the money or because the business is now a desk grommet business, but just because they want to understand what it's like to be a seller and a buyer. I think that obsessiveness about where your product is actually being used is a generalizable lesson, right? There's another story here that illustrates the point. I interviewed a designer who mentioned to me that at one point the company was paying for him to travel around the world and interview people who were using PayPal. So he would just sit with them like in their living rooms and he would say, okay, just go about your business and use PayPal. I want to understand how you use it. And he said he did over 200 of these kinds of interviews with people. And so I think that having that level of customer obsessiveness is intimately tied to product market fit, because you can find product market fit accidentally the way that PayPal did. And then you can take that and use it as a more effective place to learn about just product distribution. And that's exactly what they did in a bit. I mean, honestly, probably like 40% of the book is just chronicling that journey from starting with this money beaming product to obsessing over eBay buying and selling just to help further product market fit.
No, that's great. And it goes back to the point that even you were mentioning, right? You thought you had the secret code in the book and and you thought that people were really interested, but then they recognized that there were so many other aspects that they just loved about the book, you know? So yeah, it's so difficult to predict our users, but then, you know, they find what they really need from the product that we have. So
Right.
that's fantastic. Thank you, Jimmy.
And in the book, there are many learnings you have already shared, like for the startup owners and founders. But is there any top 3 or top 4 learnings of the Elon Musk or any other startup founders? I hope Elon Musk didn't go through your book before deciding put a bid for Twitter. I saw the news yesterday and I was thinking like, oh, okay.
No,
This is something coming up. Yeah.
I don't know if he's read it or not. I mean, he didn't have script approval, right? So he didn't have the chance to read it before it came out. But he was very gracious with me and spent a lot of time kind of walking through different lessons and examples and models. And what's interesting is that, he's just as passionate about financial services today as he was when he was starting the company that became PayPal. But there are many lessons baked into the book. I don't underline them. I don't highlight them. I want people to take from the book what they want to take from it, right? So I can offer 2 or 3 of the ones that stood out to me, and maybe they'll be helpful to the people here who are listening, who are building businesses. But honestly, even if you're not in a startup situation, I think there's lessons to be learned from startups that apply broadly in business, right? One kind of surprising lesson for me was, it is interesting. The value of inexperience is often underrated, right? And so I think like we all have a tendency to want to have all the answers before we go into something. I had this thing I wrote about in the PayPal book, which was fraud fighting. So a big part of what PayPal struggles with in its early years is fighting fraud. It's actually not difficult to build a payment system. It's very difficult to fight fraud on that payment system, right? And one of the people who helped to fight fraud shared with me, 20 years later, obviously, but she said, when we were looking for fraud analysts, we actually tried to sometimes avoid people who had worked at financial institutions. And the reason is because they came in and had a view of how a bank had fought fraud for 10 or 20 years. But we weren't a bank. We didn't have those resources. We didn't have that scale. We didn't have the built up trust or credibility. So we didn't want to have them unlearn all the ways that they had learned how to fight fraud. We actually looked for people who who were fast, flexible problem solvers, but didn't have a 20-year track record of fraud fighting, right? So I think inexperience is actually underrated to a profound degree. Like I think we tend to look down on it. We tend to minimize the power of it, meaning actually being inexperienced allows you to look at problems with some freshness and some insight. So that's kind of one thing. The second interesting thing is, and this is going to sound kind of funny or maybe even obvious, but I had a person who's a general partner at a venture capital firm write to me about the book. They had read the book and they were kind of reflecting on it. And they had said good things. And he said, one of the things that I'm happy that you did is that you didn't minimize the hard work that is required to build companies like this. And he said, because every time I tweet or post about the number of hours that it takes or this or that, he's like, I get 15 people sort of writing me hate mail saying like, how dare you talk about the difficulty or the number of hours or the grind or something like that. And he said, I'm glad that you didn't run away from that, because it's actually a big part of when you're trying to get anything off the ground at the beginning, it is enormously difficult and it is taxing and it might require more than a standard workday and you might need to work weekends. And he said, and if we run away from that and if we don't talk about it, it not only is it like false, meaning you're telling the sort of wrong version of the story, but the other thing is we don't set expectations for what entrepreneurship takes, right? And it's interesting because I had interviewed someone who he was interviewed by Elon for a job. And the first thing that Elon said to him, like kind of at the interview was, this is a startup and a lot is going to be expected of you, right? And he remembered like how bracing it was to hear that, because he was coming out of a more traditional kind of like Monday through Friday type role. And he, at the time, that was exciting for him. It was empowering. But I think that I'm not saying we need to return to a world where like this is standard practice or there are not healthier ways to do things or that there aren't advantages and leverage that we gain through technological tools. But I think we would be doing ourselves a disservice if we didn't emphasize how important it is to find people who are willing to work hard, right? That actually like these entities require a lot and that it's important to be honest about that. And it doesn't mean that you can't have moments of respite and rest. That's important too. But I think we've moved in a direction where we've ignored actually how fundamentally hard it is to build startups and to go from nothing to something. And I think it's important to tell those stories. Now, that may also lead people to say, I don't ever want to do this, which is fine. Like, that's totally fine. But I think minimizing it actually sort of tells a false version of the story. The third kind of like thing that it's an important theme throughout, and I kind of started with this, and maybe it is one of the best places to end things or to have as a final note, is it is very easy to say that you will get through failure. It's a different thing to say that you're going to embrace failure, right? So actually, like, part of startup success, at least in the PayPal story, is embracing losing money to fraud. It's embracing accidental product market fit and recognizing that your money beaming product is not going to go anywhere, no matter how many people you think are going to beam $10 at lunch. It's embracing a very complicated merger that leads to several products actually being kind of shut down, financial products that the company had built that were beyond payments. I think that is hugely tied to success. It's actually sort of running in the direction of failure so that you can move away and find better options. But it's the kind of thing that isn't talked about often enough, because only successful startups make the covers of magazines, right? And you tell the success story, but you don't tell the story of the failures, which is why in my book, I made it a point to actually talk about the things that didn't work, not just the things that did work.
I'm sure these suggestions and all these 3 points you elaborately mentioned will also help all the upcoming startup founders and the people who are working in startup.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot that entrepreneurs can take away from this conversation, and so many of them hesitate, but then just knowing that failure is okay, and most successful startups have gone through a series of failures until they finally found the success, should be very comforting for a lot of entrepreneurs to know that, that even like PayPal, the PayPal mafia, right? You said it's like almost a mini ecosystem. In India, we have the Flipkart mafia, right? They've all this has come up. These mini ecosystems have come up all over the world, which are kind of influencing the startup world. But then it takes a lot of failures to get to that point. So that should be comforting. And thank you so much for sharing all of that, Jimmy. Really insightful conversation, very illuminating. And I'm sure there's a lot of takeaways, points people would have noted. I personally have definitely, taken away quite a few things from this conversation today. So thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Congratulations again on that book. For the audience, the link of that book is in the chat. So please feel free to get to that link or the book. It's a great read. A really gripping book and a lot to learn from. Thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Jimmy.
Thank you, everyone. We will be resuming in 15 minutes with the next session.
Thank you.
When I was asked to do India at 60, I just took the attitude, we know what happened in the last 60 years, good, bad, and the ugly. So not much point in looking at the rear view mirror, let us look in front. So I took the attitude of India at 75. And I'll tell you what the bottom line is. I believe that India has the opportunity to actively shape the emerging world order. I believe that this is something that happens once in 50, 60 years, once in a lifetime opportunity for India to become an active player in shaping not only her destiny, but the destiny of the whole world, and become one of the few, maybe 5 or 6 countries which will do this. But in order to do that, I think we must have economic strength. We certainly need technological vitality. But what sometimes we don't debate as much is moral leadership. If you look at what happened to India at the end of our freedom struggle, between 50 and 60, India had enormous moral strength. And therefore, single-handedly, India created the non-aligned movement, which is the third force which shaped history of the world in a very dramatically different way. But today the discussion in India is all about economic strength, not about moral strength. So we will not succeed if we don't have enough attention paid to all three in equal measure. Economics, good innovation, creativity, and certainly good morality. I believe there is a whole different range of opportunities that we can talk about. You can assume that India became independent in 47. I would also say India became independent in 93. So we must probably celebrate it twice. 93, we opened up to the rest of the world. Now, what we have been able to accomplish in the last 13, 14 years is quite extraordinary. I believe that India can start looking at itself as a country which becomes the provider of knowledge for the whole world, not just for India. 200 million graduates, 500 million people were trained professionals. So imagine what happens if you have 500 million trained professional workers, 200 million graduates of very high quality, then for the whole world, for knowledge-based work, India inside becomes the norm. With aging population in Europe, aging population in Japan, China also will have an aging population. US is still very bimodal. So most countries need knowledge workers, people who can help and operate systems. And India has the opportunity to provide people for the whole world, not just for India. And that is the opportunity that we have. Become leaders of industry and commerce, create at least 30 Fortune 100 companies. If you look at what has happened in the last 3 years, it's very clearly focused acquisitions. This is already starting to happen. We are not there in Fortune 500 in big numbers, but very soon I expect to see people in Fortune 500, 50, 100 companies, and then move on very rapidly. So the $1 billion club in Indian companies for the first time has become a very large group compared to what it used to be 10, 15 years ago. India accounts for 10% of world trade. I believe in 1770, India had 20% of world trade. Then we went to 0.5%, which means you don't matter. Now maybe we're to 1.5%, 2%. The question is, can we get to 10 in the next 15 years? And certainly how to make India a source of innovations, which is quite important. I believe that you can look at 800 million Indians and you say this is a problem, but you can say if we can educate all of them at world-class levels and at affordable prices, then we would have created a revolution not just in India but around the world. It's not just enough to educate a large number of people, but make them world-class. If we can do it at affordable prices, we would have created a huge revolution. The same thing in healthcare, same thing in housing. I believe that India will have to produce 500 new cities. Look at urbanization in India. Look at the number of slums. We have to create at least 500 cities because 30 people leave rural India to urban India to live in a slum every minute of the day for the next 20 years. It's going to be one of the largest internal migrations you've ever witnessed. Flowering of art, literature and science, Nobel Prizes are not given to people with huge infrastructure. They're given to unique people who make a difference to the world's thinking. And that's a very different process. Some of the research requires infrastructure, but a lot of it requires commitment to personal excellence. And that is what makes the difference. And finally, there is one area where I believe fundamentally India can compete with China effectively, and China cannot even come close. We have the most diverse population in any one country that I can imagine. It's more diverse than even in Europe. All major religions, all major languages, significant differences in cuisine, lifestyles, everything exists. If we can figure out how to live in harmony, if we can not just live in harmony, but leverage our diversity to good advantage, we would have shown the world something very unique. Is this a prize worth fighting for? Leadership in the world, educated, highly educated country, economic strength because of global trade and some of the largest companies, therefore a whole infrastructure of small and medium-sized enterprises supporting them, flowering of art and literature, and celebration of diversity. I believe implementation also requires principles. The point I want to make is resources have no absolute meaning. It has only meaning in relationship to tasks, relationship to aspirations, relationship to something else. What is the aspiration about? Is it primarily about me and my family? Or is it for me and my community? Or is it for me and the world? Or for me and the whole nation? Because that's a quite important distinction. If it is for me, it's phenomenal, it's good. But what's the problem? We will maximize private good and sacrifice public good. If it is for the whole country, it's very different. So I'm happy that you think it's all about aspirations. My sense is, of course, every family has aspirations for the children. That is fine. Maybe we have aspirations for the city in which we live or the community in which we live. But if it is a national shared aspiration, like Purna Swaraj, it is not obvious to me. Maybe because I don't live here full time. District to do whatever they want, so that we have such an asymmetric development and so much of disempowerment that we have created already a lot of fragmentation. That is 40% of India is lawless. If we push this another 10 years, what is the guarantee that we will not look like Afghanistan? Then let's not talk about global leadership. What I want you to think about is 500 Rajas lived in this country before independence. The British did not want independence. In spite of all that, without television, without internet, without radio, without large number of newspapers, we created a common vision for all of India. So we are divisive, we are asymmetric in our development. If we don't create a common vision, if we don't help each other, if we don't pull together, we will have a totally divided, fragmented countries that can fall apart. So the danger, this is a national security issue. This is not just about economic development. So I am presenting the potential as an opportunity. So the aspiration cannot be only for the community or only for the individual. In other words, you must worry about the whole country. Otherwise, we will fragment very fast. You already see the fragmentation. You must imagine the new India. If when Gandhiji said Purna Swaraj, if somebody got up in the meeting, of course none of us had the courage, nobody had the courage to challenge him, but let us assume somebody stood up and said, Gandhiji, can you tell me how to do it? What could he have said? Could he have given the means? Of course not. What I want you to think about, put a stake in the ground of what the India of your dreams, and then work backwards to say how to make it happen. If you start from where you are and try to look at what India can be, you can only stay at the art of the possible, not think of a new India. How do you create aspirations beyond resources? How do you fold the future in? And what we have to do in India, you cannot go and benchmark anybody. No society has transformed 1 billion people economically and socially and culturally in a short period of time. So we have to focus on next practice, not on best practice. All of us will have to say, we have to radically rethink our policies and practices. And we have to create a shared commitment to goals. And certainly, we have to increase our aspiration level. We have aspirations, but not big enough. We have to do it in an emerging context, social context. I say income inequality is going to be a bigger problem for us than poverty. More than income inequality, I think opportunity inequality is a bigger problem. Lifestyle inequality is a bigger problem. Why are the Naxalites so powerful? Because it's opportunity inequality. Why is there so much caste-based politics? for reservations, it is because opportunity inequality. So we want to really think beyond incomes to opportunities and lifestyles. We must create transparent solutions. In fact, as long as you have transparent solutions, call it markets if you will, but transparent solutions. But also, we want to create access and affordability to all people. India cannot be changed without scale. If you don't touch the lives of 100 million people, you are not making a difference. So scale is fundamental. Same thing, we have to protect our environment, but all our systems are stressed. Water, forest deforestation, pollution, it's wastage, tremendous problems. And of course, transaction cost, bad governance. I say, first change in mental models. Let's think big. We have lots of data, but decisions are political, ideological, not data-driven. And I think that has to change. We may have pushed group rights beyond a point. We have to rebalance it and bring it back to some individual rights, not just all group rights. Corruption must be treated as treason, and I'm very clear. Corruption is all our responsibility. No corrupt country is rich. Some people in that country may be rich, the country is not rich. No corrupt country develops the human resources. And no country that does not develop its human resources is rich. The desire for individual advantage, masking the collective requirements of other people, is creating a very distorted view of what India can be. The question is, the message for me is, can we be honest when no one is looking? Or should we be honest only when everybody is looking? I'll leave it to you. So I just say, let's develop an innovation sandbox. Let us assume 6 core assumptions. First is we need scale. Second, we must be environmentally sensitive and rigorously impose environmental standards. We must change the value proposition for everything we do, whether it's primary education, college education, make it affordable to everybody. We must be market-based. We must focus on social equity and public good, and we must respect the rule of law. If all of us only agree to these 6, and every decision that we make, we went through this and said, am I following these 6 principles? And the answer is yes, and we make our decisions, I think we can create the India of the future. And you can't say, I'll only take the 3 which are interesting, but I don't like social equity, or I don't like lack of corruption and fairly transparent systems. You can't pick and choose. You have to take it as a package. If you do, I think India will be very different. This is what I shared with the group in CII in 1989. I said you can look at the world as local firms and global firms, small domestic market and world-scale domestic market. What is the advantage of the United States? One of the world's largest markets, and also home for some of the best companies. So is Germany, and so is Japan. The question is, China and India did not have a domestic market of world size, neither did they have any global companies. So I said maybe by 2000 we can get there. And we were fairly close. I think we can only do it if you can get our imagination right, passion and courage for making India different. Some analysis, yes, but pure analysis will not get us there. We must have the belief in ourselves and in our country to get there. But it's not only for India, it's not only for our community, it's not only for our cities, but it is for the whole world. This is important, not just for India. Of course it's important for India, but it's also important for the world because we represent 1/5 of humanity. This is one person's view of what India can be.
Listening to CK is always insightful. The last session with Mr. Soni was brilliant, and it's always great listening to diverse perspectives. Now I would like to welcome our second speaker, Mr. Rajan Navani. Rajan is the Vice Chairman and Managing Director of Jetline Group's Jet Synthesis, a new-age digital entertainment and technology company with a portfolio of world-class products aiming to touch the digital lives of billions of consumers in India and around the globe. Under his leadership and strategic direction, Jet Synthesis is currently serving millions of users globally by harnessing advanced capabilities in artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchain, and AR/VR. Rajan has been the national president of the Indian Digital Gaming Society since the institution of the body in 2018. He is currently the chairman of the Confederation of Indian Industries National Council on India at 75 and founding trustee of the India at 75 Foundation. He is Government of India nominated CEO of the India-Japan Business Leadership Forum, member of the India-Sweden Business Leaders Forum, and is founding board member of India Diaspora, a powerful network linking the Indian American diaspora with India. Welcome, Mr. Navani.
Thank you, Sangya. So we will be accompanied by Professor M.S. Krishnan shortly. He's facing some technical difficulties, but I'll just continue with his introduction. So he will be joining us with Mr. Navani in the Fireside chat. He is not only the Faculty Director of Business plus Tech Initiative at Ross School of Business, but also the C.K. Prahalad Initiative and India Initiative. Professor Krishnan is also the Accenture Professor of Computer Information Systems and Professor of Technology and Operations at the Ross School of Business. He has co-authored the book, The New Age of Innovation, Driving Co-Created Value with Global Networks, along with Professor C.K. Prahalad in 2008. Now, I would like to hand over the platform to our speakers, but in the meantime, we can just continue the discussion. Mr. Navani, we welcome you on the stage. And I'll just check in the meantime with Professor Krishnan of what exactly is the concern.
Sure, thanks. Pleasure to be here with all of you, and thank you for having me here at this event today. Always a pleasure to be at an event, which has CK attached to it. Very deep, long memories. Person who has personally impacted a lot of the thinking and thought processes, not only for me, but I can say for a huge generation of people across India and the world. I mean, it was not a coincidence that he was rated the world's #1 thinker. And, I came in a little early and I saw the talk of India at 75 that I think you all were playing. And, I was there in that session. And, I distinctly remember the impact it had on all the people who were present there. It was the Young Indians group. I had chaired that national previous year and was chairing this event. And I must say that, the simplicity with which one could put the most obvious ideas across for India came out so beautifully in what we conveyed. And still there was tremendous complexity and a lot of hard work behind that was able to predict what India at 75 could be. And here we are, we are in our 75th year of Indian independence, and so excited to see where we will go from here as we move to India at 100. So anyway, I thought I would just make that comment before we get started. So I think we're waiting for Professor Krishnan. So.
Yeah, he's facing some technical issues. There are some glitches. So
he's joining in a minute. I am trying to bring him in the panelists. He's coming.
So, Mr. Navani, a question as we're waiting for Professor Krishnan. You've been associated with Professor Prahalad and with Dr. Prahalad and been a part of this implementation. What were some of the interesting challenges that you ran into as you were translating this vision into ground reality?
Yeah, this was a very interesting, opportunity, right? You think about it, we're sitting in New York celebrating India at 60, and, here comes CK talking about, about India at 75, and saying, why are we talking about something that has already happened? We know data from the past, 1992 to 2007, economic liberalization in India. Let's talk about what we can do to turbocharge and accelerate that. And that's when he presented the India at 75, paper, and then translated into a bottoms-up, aspiration-led, kind of a movement which captured the imaginations of people. So one thing was very clear, that what we set out to do was really the desire and wish of people in India. So the order of magnitude change that we were talking of was pretty significant. So I still remember and I told him the same thing. I said, we'll be in 2022, and we're talking of so many, 500 million skilled workforce. We talk of, initially it was 500 developed smart cities. So, that's a big, huge number, right? What if we're sitting in 2022 and we haven't achieved that? So that's what you asked, right? And I still remember, he said, what we are trying to trigger are two things. One is, an order of magnitude change for a country like India and make multiple stakeholders realize the potential of this country and, realize it in a manner which is unified, right? So, whether it's the bureaucracy, whether it's the industrialist, whether it's the housewife, whether it is the student, they're all seeing the same India emerge, right, in 2022. And therefore, we need to capture, everything. So he said, even if, we don't achieve those numbers, one thing will be sure that without our effort, the order of magnitude change would not have happened, right? At least the order of magnitude. And second, what was again a very striking point was the process, right? In which, we heard a little bit about it. You fold the future in and then you innovate within, non-negotiable constraints which are there for India, be it, scale or price performance, and affordability, and many of the other things that, CK talked about. So I think that if that process is also underway, then whether it is India at 80, India at 85, we know we are going to be able to amplify, this opportunity, strengthen and deepen it more. So I think one was, the ambition of the vision, right? So that was definitely a challenge convincing multiple stakeholders, that that's what we're going to do. Second was really, this agenda has a lot to do with, with government as well. Right? I mean, it's not something that only industry or only, stakeholders, from academia or others can accomplish. And these are governments right from panchayats to districts to cities to states to national. And as, governments change, priorities change. And the good part about India at 75 is, at least as far as, this agenda is concerned, at a national level, it started in 2007, but today it's under a different government, we are achieving this. And the enthusiasm of celebrating this as the Amrit Mahotsav is, I would say, only amplified, from whatever we could ever hope to achieve. And I think that's an outcome of one meeting that happened in 2008. And I think it's a good platform for me to share that, where CK and I were with Prime Minister Modi, then the Chief Minister of Gujarat. I remember we had a 45-minute slot and we landed spending 3 hours together, where, CK was sharing the vision and, Prime Minister Modi, then the Chief Minister of Gujarat was, his opening lines were, "Dunya ke नंबर 1 बुद्धिमान व्यक्ति भारतीय हैं और वो यहाँ पे आए हैं, and that is what I respect. So I respect the fact that the world's #1 thinker is in India and he has come here, and I'm very eager to listen. And the whole conversation, he spoke in Hindi, CK spoke in English, and I was the translator between brilliant minds, one the world's #1 thinker, and it concluded, with then CM Modi saying, "Delhi aayenge to kare." So if I come to Delhi, we'll make it happen. And I don't know if you're aware, but when he came in 2014, as soon as he got elected, the very next day of the election, when he was talking to his BJP parties, he said, "We will set a vision for India that is not our next election, that is 2019, but we will set a vision for 2022, which is India at 75. And it was with that promptness, that Prime Minister Modi took it up. We all know New India of 2022 was set up. And from that point on, a lot of the government initiatives, have also been aligned around many of the aspects of what emerged with that vision. Of course, the vision got refined along the way, with inputs from industry and many others. So, as I said, there were many challenges. And of course, as I said, they are the larger challenges. How do you inspire many people to align, but also to act? And these will continue to be issues and challenges, but directionally, I think we have really achieved many aspects of the vision. And today, if I were to look at government agendas, and there's a long list, and map it against many of the vision elements, you will see a lot of schemes, a lot of plans, be it the financial stack, the digital India, there are so many, Make in India, many initiatives of the current government align directly with many aspects of what were there in the vision. And so I always like to look at, the opportunity rather than, the challenges. And I think that's how CK would have liked to frame this answer. We need to be honest. We need to be able to understand, things that you can affect, impact, and change, and things you cannot. Like the MyGov platform, for example, participative governance and volunteering was a big thing that he believed in. Right? And today we've been able to achieve that at significant scale, even within the India 75 initiative. Now, obviously, there are going to be, challenges of what one would have liked to see, and where we are, and how could certain things have been better. But at the end of the day, I think the biggest achievement is that we are sitting here today in 2022 talking about this agenda that has had the highest profile industrialists. If you go to the foundation, you see the trustees, you see government, you see everyone engaged in an agenda like this. And I must say that on the 23rd and 24th of August, I don't know if there will be a live stream of the event, but there is a very large event happening in Delhi, which, of course, I, along with Sanjeev Goenka, who's the foundation chair, will be chairing together, where 9 ministers are going to come talk about India at 75 and together use a lot of the thinking and learning that we have had as we move towards India at 100 and share their thoughts. What would be some of the ways and things that we need to understand better, improve upon, and make that change happen? So, exciting times, I would say, and I think all of you at Michigan should be really proud about this large initiative that got triggered by someone who I know all of you really respect, and someone I think the world has come to recognize as a visionary when it comes to what India can be and is to potential.
Absolutely. I mean, CK was a visionary, and all of us love and admire CK and all the learnings and teachings that we've had from him. He definitely set the trajectory for growth for India and the global economy. I can see that Professor Krishnan was able to join. So going to hand over to Professor Krishnan. Thank you so much for being here, sir. And Mr. Navani, looking forward to the rest of the conversation.
Thank you very much, Anviti. And, my apologies. Actually, this is one of those realities of virtual world. I'm actually sitting here. I'm watching all of you. I'm just not able to get in. And we found out that they made me not a panelist, but an audience. Okay. And I was just watching and listening to all of you. It is almost like the analogy will be they're calling your name on the stage and somebody has tied your legs and arms, and you just can't go there. But anyway, thanks for the patience, and sorry for the technical glitch on our side. And so the problem was they actually made me not a panelist but audience. That's what is the problem. So now I'm back. Let me actually welcome Rajan. Rajan, first of all, thank you so much for taking time for our students for this conference. And I know that you are one of those closely connected with CK's vision of India at 75. More from the point of view of a younger team that he put together to have to go and execute. Right? I mean, kind of he wanted some young minds, who are with a lot of energy. He wanted to kind of motivate this group to kind of go and take it to different parts of the country and start the execution phase. And I know you were part of that, and your passion. I still recall, those India at 75 forums that you used to conduct in different venues in the different cities, and I happen to attend few of them, as you know. So I would like to first, can you give us some highlights about CK had a vision of India at 75, 2008, and then can you give us a little bit of highlights of what was achieved, bringing together the ecosystem of business leaders, community, government, and can you give us some examples of launching the initiative?
No, thanks, Krishnan, and such a joy and a pleasure to be with you as well. It just brings back so many lovely old memories, and I remember many conversations that we had along with CK.
Yeah.
And, the respect that CK had for you and your thought process as well. And so many times we shared, different conversations along the journey. So firstly, thank you for having me here. It's always such a pleasure. And talking to students is something that, inspires the person who is speaking. So, I look forward to this interaction if it becomes one where we can have some more Q&A from some of the students as well. But, to take your point, Krishnan, as we discussed about India at 75, and we had a little chat before you came in, and I did share a little bit about the journey and, different aspects. But, if we talked of creating, 500 million skilled workforce, being able to create universal literacy, the largest pool of trained manpower, say, around the world, and then really looking at it, because when there is skills built in, how do you look at, infrastructure, how do you look at housing, how do you make that affordable, and then how do you make it all sustainable, with different aspects of renewable energy, etc. And this was the last diagram that, CK drew in that black book, which he made all of us have, just before he gave the Nani Palkiwala lecture. That was the last time, I think I saw him. And that to me was, one thing that had moved, as one unit. So the National Skill Development Corporation, in India got formed as an outcome of the India at 75 vision. The then president of India actually announced it to both houses of parliament. When Prime Minister Manmohan Singh at that time spoke at CK's memorial, he acknowledged that the entire journey around creating skills movement in India really was inspired by the work that, India at 75, CII, Young Indians all had done. And what really happened there, I think if you look at an interest that is aligned with all stakeholders, you see traction, much, much faster. So government, obviously, for any political party, being able to create better livelihoods for their constituents is a given, right? And if we saw corporate India, and I know you had Kamath here last week, KVK, Adi Godesh, all announced immediately, ICICI Bank, Godrej, we will skill 1 million people, within the next 3 to 5 years in areas that are going to impact maybe our businesses, but it will definitely, enhance livelihoods around people across the country. So we saw a lot of corporate India aligning around that. Then, you see nonprofits, right? And there's a very large nonprofit from the US itself. And at that point, we were talking about, creating a 500 million skilled workforce. And, someone who had taken the pledge, the Gates pledge, came up and said, what, I'll take up 5%, or we will take up 5% of India's target of skilling 25 million people, right? So what you saw is that, building livelihoods is also in a way a philanthropic exercise, especially when it comes to a country like India, where you're seeing, millions who need to move out of poverty and many others who need to move up the value chain. So we saw civil society, non-government organizations also aligning around that. And I think the biggest change we saw was when entrepreneurs, came in with innovative ideas, targeting this capacity building in human beings, right? And I know we used to do a power to empower, competition, which started about 3 years later. And, from 100 applicants first, within 5 years, we had about 1,300 new applications for innovative ways in which you can build capacity in people in India. And it took up all forms. It was a for-profit, non-profit, social service, voluntary ways of doing that. So what happens is, when you set a large vision and you inspire people, and that vision or an element of that vision, resonates to serve the needs of all stakeholders in some shape and form, right? I think the movement gets multiplied, right? So even though we may not have achieved, the exact numbers, and that's what I was sharing earlier,
That's right.
the order of magnitude change, the methodology of making that happen, is set. And today, if we see edutech companies coming out of India, Byju's and many others, are actually global leader models coming from India. Unlike many others where India followed maybe, the Ola followed the Uber, or, Oyo followed the Airbnb. But when it came to edutech, India has actually gone out, to the world, with some of the largest unicorns. And this is all happened in 15 years, right? So we are seeing technology being used very effectively to create both economic strength, modern leadership, build human capacity. And like this, there are many examples, right? When it comes to a city-level affordability platform, and I can go on, but maybe we want to cover other things. But this was one good example of skill and capacity development that has worked very well.
Yeah, I'm glad you actually brought up the skill. I think from what you said, it's very interesting. Like, the way the entire community, I mean, corporate India and then nonprofit, they all took skills. The skill development is quite similar to later on when we hear about the Swachh Bharat, right? Everybody wanted to build, build the toilets or something like that, right? That's exactly similar to, the same theme that started with the skill development. So the point is, he set the momentum going, right? Now let's see, after 2008. You talked about entrepreneurship, right? And of course, right in front of us, you are sitting a great entrepreneur, in terms of new ideas. I want to take this discussion to your journey because as if you go back to CK's India 25 vision, he certainly could see the potential of technology in terms of what, the technology trends, broader technology trends, how fundamentally it'll change the structure of the business models. And I had the fortunate opportunity to work with him, on that book on how it'll move towards personalization because of technology. Now, you have championed one of the new industries, right, in the last decade. For example, 10 years back, we never thought about, or there's no idea about esports as a concept, right? 10, 12 years back, and this digitization wave, you are one of the, entrepreneurs who actually kind of, initiated some new ideas around the space of with the, digital platform as a base for either it is entertainment, education, or sports. Can you tell us about your journey, like, how it started and when, and then we would like to hear about where it is now. And then I would also want to kind of follow the discussion with your future vision.
No, thanks, Krishnan. I think, CK, of course, has played a key role in also that thought process, especially on the digital side. And I remember a discussion where we said, and he said, I'll be on the board of this company. I told him, I still remember, and unfortunately, by the time, this whole thing set up, of course, there's no more. But, but the ideas that we used to talk about, see, I come from a business family, that is an 80-year-old traditional business family, started by my grandfather in Thailand, built large-scale manufacturing. Aditya Birla Group, when they came to Thailand, we were the partners. So large textiles, packaging, electronics, and there was this family value, right? Because these are all business students. Ultimately, business families constitute 80% of the world things. And what really one generation to the other carries on is values. Of course, you can continue to treat the same businesses forward. So for us, it was really, my grandfather had a clear philosophy: roti, kapda, makan, clothing, food, and shelter. And of course, he got into all of those as the human needs. But as I started seeing, what my daughter would want probably, or, looked at Silicon Valley and the chain, said, I don't care the food I eat, the clothes I wear, or the home I live in. Just give me, bandwidth, give me Wi-Fi connectivity, and that's my single biggest need, right? And that, when you talk about, someone, like in our family kind of thinking of that, it was very obvious that would be a need that would transform and change the lives of millions around the world. And I think that was the big trigger, that enabled us to look, at least to me, to look differently. I said, capital allocation to land, building machinery, and then putting a crazy workforce to try and sell a product that's probably not relevant, or that you make small improvisations, or you cut prices and try and, push that. Let's build a complete different foundation. Let's understand where the consumer is and what is the consumer doing, and then in real quick time be able to synthesize their needs. And that was jet synthesis, as the formative word, because it was about, having an asset-light model, using technology to deliver value at scale, right? Because if you had to distribute, reach out to people, at scale would be very difficult. So the thought process there, of course, worked with McKinsey, many others, and I think the key driver of success in a digital world, at least at that point, which I felt was, how do you build trust? And in a real world, you can go see physical structures, you can look at that, these people exist, this service exists, something, but in a digital world, it's very hard. So that's when we realized that we needed to engage with stakeholders. We needed to have them with us for significant amounts of time, build trust in multiple different ways, and then, offer products, services that will, of course, amplify that relationship, into a new domain. And that was how Jet Synthesis really, said we'll cater to the lives of 1 billion people in India and extend that, globally. And as we were looking, Krishnan, at the digital first adopters, right? We saw this new millennials and Gen Zs, engaging, and the only way, to get them to be engaged beyond the email or beyond the chats, because there was a Google, there was a Tencent, there were others who had captured, or a WhatsApp that had captured, gaming seemed to be a two-way interaction. Young people were engaging with it. It was, you were able to build relationships with young people through, product services that engaged in that. And that's when we took a call that, and India was at its very nascent stage, right? So in a $180 billion industry today, of course, a decade ago, it was much smaller, but India was insignificant player. Even today, we are less than 1% of that global business. And that's when we realized that if we are able to create this ecosystem play, so right from building games, seeing the funnel of a casual gamer go to mid-core, go to a professional gamer, and that was e-sport, right? And I remember in Poland, in Warsaw, I saw 20,000 people sitting in a stadium watching two sets of gamers play with the same moves and hours that we have in India when you watch a cricket match. And I said, it's going to come. And that's when we created what is India's largest esports company today, and also a grassroots play today that is, bringing the tier 2, tier 3, 20 different languages that, commentators and others are participating in to identify the best talent. Because I believe that as esports is becoming an Asian Games or Olympic sport, like in any other sport, the champions will come from rural India. They will come from parts of India, that we may not even know, and that is beginning to happen. So I think it's been a massive, thing that has happened when it comes to, things like esport. Looked at that opportunity early, and today I think we're extremely confident that India's presence in the global world of esport is only going to grow and strengthen from where we are today, because the sheer number of people playing games, and 17% of gaming downloads on Android in the world over in India, and we're still just less than 1% of the population. So many ideas, how we leverage talent, how do we build world-class capabilities, how do we build world-class products from India, how do we therefore encourage participation from young people in many different areas that will emerge out of gaming, are all areas that we are building up.
Yeah, and you have 100 million customers, is it what? I looked at the numbers.
Actually, our cricket franchise by itself, and that is a skilled cricket franchise, and we have two products there, a game called Real Cricket and something called Sachin Saga, which is with Sachin Tendulkar, where you play as Sachin in 100 of his best innings. Every shot in the game is motion captured with him, the virtual. That franchise itself, we have about 130 million downloads across the world, but we have consumers, millions of consumers who are playing those games itself every day. But our overall ecosystem is actually quite large when it comes to the number of gamers. So we have about a 60% global market share in that.
Yeah, this is very interesting. Let me, I'm very curious about this. As you were speaking, this cricket franchise that you have, right, which is esports, and you have so much of engagement, and then you also talked about how we are seeing the IPL being so successful, and then the real cricket, where connection to the rural kind of locations where it was not getting as much of prominence or visibility before, right? And you have players coming from different parts of different corners of the country. Now, let me ask a question. Do you see a relationship between the engagement in the esports and what is happening in the real world with the real cricket and the players? Because this is where I think the future of metaverse we are talking about, right? I mean, the connection between what we are seeing in the virtual world of how people are engaging and what we are seeing in terms of the talent coming from those sectors. Has there any study being done or anybody looking into this?
No, it's actually very interesting, and I'll give you an example that will explain this beautifully. So I'm on the global board of the US India Business Council, and they wanted to do an esports event, and we had invited the Undersecretary for Services who sits in the White House as a chief guest. And we had a competition in cricket, electronic cricket, on our game called Real Game between the US and India. And the US team actually beat the India team. And he was thrilled, right? And he said, finally America can beat India in cricket, right? Though the electronic version. Now, just take that as a great, understanding of how young people from two countries can, of course, connect. But more importantly, if you want to play the real game of cricket, right, on the ground, you need a lot of things to be able to come up to be at any significant level, like in any other sport. And if you don't have the facilities, you don't have the community, you don't have the trainers, the coaches, etc., obviously you're not going to be able to get there. An electronic version of cricket, you still play the same rules, you still have the same things, but the skills required are very different. Here you've got hand-eye coordination. You got to be able to predict, so your shot is not an arm shot, it is a finger click, right? I mean, if you're on the mobile, right? So your mental, ability to be able to predict the ball, looking at how the bowler is going to bowl with his arm rather than, when you guys come in physically, the lighting. So we try and make the virtual versions as real as the real one. But we got to remember one thing, that the skills required to be the champion in that are very different from the ones in
real cricket. Yeah.
And I think this is really what the metaverse is going to also be. Since you raised it, there is your avatar there who can be, have any special abilities, any capabilities that you only dreamt of, right? So science fiction is what you live there, and the world that you live in the real world. Now, which world is real is what is actually going to move away. Is Krishna the man with all the superpower abilities to be able to do everything, really the person there? So for the younger generation, a large part of their time is spent there. They don't want to buy stuff and own in the real world because they say, we don't even have a home. We don't even know, but I can buy a digital virtual asset that makes me look good in my community there. And that is real. And Web3 is really changing that in a massive way.
That's really interesting. I mean, I think this conversation is we should actually look at this in terms of, if there is so much of enthusiasm in the virtual cricket, right? Does it transfer to real interest from that geographical community in actual game itself? Like, for example, if Krishnan's avatar or Rajan's avatar in metaverse really becomes exercise buff, right? Kind of really doing, jogging 8 miles per day or whatever it is. But then would that translate into the person? Or because the bridge between the physical world and the virtual world would be very, very interesting as it evolves, right? I mean, so this is very exciting in terms of what we'll see. I'm so impressed with what you created from India with cricket as a passion, with 120 million downloads. Wow. I mean, I think we should learn more about that. Let me also, take with that, engagement. Now you also expanded to broader entertainment, is it not, with your platform?
Yeah. So, No. So actually, it's pretty interesting because the Gen Z user in Patna, in Bihar, who is playing esport, is the same guy or same girl who is listening to music. So, what we said, if we look at, looking at the entertainment needs of people. So we have now a 46% market share of Bhojpuri music, new IP creation last year. And Bhojpuri music, if you would not know, is Bhojpuri is the fifth most spoken language in the world, right? I mean, so you can only imagine what that means at scale in a country like that. So, basically, if we look at entertainment, for that one particular person through the day, so Gen Z, what we've done is we've interestingly combined it, from a daily journey perspective, right? So we have a mindfulness platform called ThinkRight.me, really, which triggers the first 5 a.m. thought in your mind that I'm not going to get angry to it. Like, we are all sitting with students, and what does our education teach us, right? What to say and what to do, right? Or what not to say. Don't speak lies, don't hit anyone. But the source of all of that is thought, right? We first think we're not going to say lies, or why we need to speak lies, or first why we need to, your ego is hurt, or you want to get ahead of the others, so you speak a lie, right? So thinkrite.me instills you to think from your mind first and says, I won't get angry today, and then handholds you through the day to make sure you don't get angry. So I'm just giving an example, starting with something like that, to playing cricket, to listening to music, to getting a loan, to looking for a better job. We have captured the daily life of people in India and in many other parts of the world through different products, but all interconnected, within a manner that match the interests and the opinion of people. Right? So if you're not looking for a job, then you're not, you don't need to come on to Job Dost or Sonic Jobs, our platforms which are there. But if you're looking for a loan, you go to any fintech and you look for a new age loan, against your salary, where the demand of the young people we realized was, why should I work for 30 days before I get a salary? I should get a salary on day one, and then, the company needs to trust me that I will work for 30 days, right? So we say, we'll solve the problem. You take a salary on the first day, we'll take it on the 30th. I mean, it's common in the US, but similar models have now been created in India. Just to give you an example. So it caters to all the needs of this next emerging consumer class, right? In a country like India, keeping in mind all those aspects of the new India, which we talk of, price performance, affordability, etc., at which, again, start to work, at scale. You talked of the metaverse again, right? And what is the relationship between the two worlds? So if you see a mindfulness exercise, for example, right, it transforms your life in your real world massively. Right? I mean, you think about it, your avatar. I mean, you just think about it. You are thinking, or you're doing some meditation activity, right, that is impacting you and is changing the way you live, changing the way you do it, right? Your avatar is doing yoga, but you are also physically, kind of contributing, right? So that is our, one other platform which Thinkrite, we move to Right Life, which we are looking at exactly that. You start in the metaverse and you come here, right? If you see the creator economy that's going to get created, and we just got our first product, from the metaverse, where a creator created a shoe, right? Now there's a massive craze with with sneakers, right, around the world, right? So it's not a Nike, it's not an Adidas, it's a creator, creating the shoe, for the avatar. You're looking at it, you're seeing your friends, you're showing it there, and then through a 3D printing process, an advanced 3D printer with many other aspects, that same thing to your size, everything is put on your foot, within 12 hours, right? Now that kind of a change, right, where you're identifying, you're living there, and you're just fulfilling your needs in the real world, to me, actually changes where the economy of the world will go. Right? Where will you start, identifying and buying things? And the two economies are linked, Krishnan, today. If you see, Fiat is linked to a crypto. So the economies are linked. $230 billion of real world cash has already gone into that, and trillions of dollars of value created. Now, there are tons of issues, governments, policies, there'll be so many challenges. But where are you going to spend your time? And AR, MR, mixed reality, just making that so, like today, you and I are talking like this with the screen. I mean, I'm 100% sure if we talk in India at 80, we'll be sitting in a hologram across with each other with 5G. You could be wherever I could, and we both feel that we're talking to each other in 3D, in the 3 dimension. It's going to happen. I mean, irrespective whether you and I agree or not, right? So am I really talking to you? And if I, move my hand like that, you won't be there, but you will still be talking, So we used to hear all of this as science fiction. I think science fiction is reality today. It's just, how much of it can you imagine and what more can we create as a human race?
No, I hear you. I mean, thanks for that perspective. And are there any experimentation in your platform or in India around NFTs in terms of, you talked about people designing the sneakers and, so are there NFTs, where exactly is it in India right now?
Yeah, so for us, NFTs work in multiple places, right? So blockchain gaming is a big trend that is taking off, NFT in music. So we launched India's first music NFT with a singer called Soni. He just got the Padma Award.
He's a famous singer. Yeah.
Now and ownership of a song in English, which Sonu had sung actually with the US collaboration. And you'll be the single owner of that product in the world, right? And then we have a kind of a hologram where you can place it in your drawing room, and he comes out and you can say, hey, like if you want to see my piece of art, you say, hey, here's my song, right, which I own, and it can come alive. It's an experience, right? So it's exactly a digital asset that you can own, you can experience, you can make money out of, you can trade it later, you can do that. And then we have other drops which are of some of the lyrics he has written and many other things like that. Just to give you one example, but and we launched this out of the UK because the market for this is not necessarily only an Indian. There's a global Indian community that might value that more.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, you go to the US, so it's about owning a piece of your country, owning something from your land, having it in an international. These are all emotions that people do have, right? You made all the wealth, you've got that. How do you become a part of that? Right? So yeah. I think when you talk of NFTs, I think thinking about NFTs, what could they mean? How do you really build an emotional connect? What will separate one from the other? Where does value get created? Because see, collectibles, wearable, rarity, exclusivity was always one part. But many a times, if you have somebody who's looking at it from an investment perspective, right? I mean, would this asset become valuable over a period of time? And we are seeing, a lot of NFT value could suddenly be dropped and slashed, right? Because I think one needs to think through, right? What is that collectible or digital virtual asset that will appreciate in value, right? And whom will it appreciate for? So I think there are many considerations. I still think it's very early days for NFTs. And one thing is quite clear, there are many who have just gone with the premise of, trying to be the early mover, raise a lot of capital and try and, figure it out. Whereas, others like us have been in this field. We've created real world businesses, of course, digitally and for virtual worlds, but we've only sold virtual assets. In a game, what do you sell? You sell virtual assets. So it's far easier for companies like ours to be able to strengthen our offerings, by creating NFTs than many others. So we've been playing a slower game there, but we're definitely super excited about the potential and going far deeper as things open up.
Wonderful. I know we are actually almost on time, and because I want to, this is exciting to hear from you, Rajan. Somebody who's leading the, the metaverse version in India, right? I mean, so short, what is your vision for India? I know a lot of things happening with the government and initiatives, but in your space, as you see the esports and the virtual world taking off, and also the younger generation in India really catching up with this, what is your vision of India at 100 in the next 20, 25 years on this path that you've taken, in terms of the jet synthesis path?
To me, I think it is the empowerment of every single individual, right? I think CK talked about, group empowerment, and we have to move away. I think personalization of technology, empowerment, ability, to create. You talk of DeFi, you talk of that. Every individual will be powerful, will have an ability to create, have the ability to be able to, leverage that creativity to do so many other things. Unlike the world, where we've seen a lot of things happening, which are routine, the tasks will go, that will be handled by machines and computers or whatever. And the true potential of every human being can get unlocked. I think what we need is the right skilling, not skilling for the livelihood, but skilling to build the best version of yourself. Right? I think things like that, to me, are going to shape the future, not only of India, but I think of the world. So for jet synthesis, we talk of digital for good, we talk of gaming for good, we talk of the goodness quotient in all that we do is about bringing out the best in people. So I think if we bring out the best in people through our products and services, everything else is going to come as an outcome. Yeah. So trusting, for having millions and maybe hundreds of millions and billions of consumers, trusting what we do to be able to help them be a better version of themselves, actually is the empowerment we think we can give our consumers. And on that basis, build jet synthesis into something significant.
Oh, that's fantastic. Very well said, Rajan. I'm really impressed, because think about if you just empower even 10% of India, right? And you give them the opportunity to kind of discover themselves and, and then present themselves in terms of what they want to be, it'll be amazing impact. Thank you so much for your time and all these insights. I know that I'm going to follow up. I think that we got to talk more, and I think there is a potential for us to bring together, even in terms of our own courses, in terms of cases and things like that. This is the happening world now, right? And look forward to connecting, following up with you. And I know if there are maybe questions from students, I'm going to send it to you, because I'm not accessing it. I'm seeing the access in the chat box here. So that may be another technical thing, I don't know, but we will follow up with you. But I wanted to, on behalf of the Ross Business School, the program committee organizing the conference, wanted to thank you for your time, valuable time, okay, and all these insights you presented. And we look forward to be in touch and learn more about your progress. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you to you and to all the others who have helped set this up. And I'm always happy to be able to participate in any way,
Sure.
in anything that we can help with Ross and Michigan.
We are coming back to you. I can tell you that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Likewise. Thank you so much.
See you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. We'll be resuming in the next 10 minutes with the next session.
University of Michigan. Well, welcome, Professor Prahalad, and thank
Nice
you.
to be here, Will.
Thank you for joining us today. For those who are not familiar with your work, could you take a moment and summarize how companies can do well by doing good in their efforts to serve the bottom of the pyramid consumers?
I think the starting point is approximately 5 billion people have been below the radar screen of the large organized sector, including multinational corporations. So the question is, what if we turn these 5 billion people into active micro consumers and micro producers so they can effectively engage in global commerce and get the benefits of global commerce? The basic premise is these 5 billion people, if they are mobilized, organized, this could be the next engine of enormous growth around the world, and the companies would benefit, therefore they will do well. At the same time, they would dramatically improve the quality of life and access to goods and services, and certainly the capacity for getting a better livelihood. Therefore, they'll also do good.
Professor, you recently co-authored a paper for the Harvard Business Review in which you explain your theory of co-creation and the benefits of cooperation between corporations and NGOs in their efforts to reach the bottom of the pyramid.
So I think whether you start from Seattle or Davos, people have started assuming that civil society and the large company necessarily must have an adversarial relationship. Obviously, they have very different ideological starting points. But increasingly, if you look at what is happening, the large company, in order to access the bottom of the pyramid consumers and also to mobilize them as producers of goods and services, needs to get the benefit of NGOs who have local knowledge and local trust. So both of them now seeing that there is a value in convergence between the global standards, global knowledge, global scale, and local trust, local understanding, and local responsiveness.
Professor, what do you think is the single biggest impediment to the adoption of ICT in India?
But ICT's biggest impediment for me is we are not building rapidly viable, sustainable economic models which are self-sustaining. Either it is subsidies from the government or CSR or purely philanthropy-oriented NGOs. They can all experiment, but if you want to sustain, if you want to scale rapidly, we have to build economic models. Technology is an integral part of what happens. But that's only one part.
In closing, is there any particular word of advice you'd like to give to a policymaker or the leader of an NGO or maybe an enterprising startup about how they might address bringing ICT to the bottom of the pyramid?
I think we have to start by asking ourselves, how do we democratize opportunities and how do we democratize commerce? And what it really means is providing same information
same opportunities for people across the world, whether they're rich or poor, rural or urban. And ICT provides a vehicle for doing it. ICT is not an end in itself. It is the social and economic transformation that ICT can enable that makes it interesting. So I think ICT has a huge role to play.
Dr. Brown, thank you very much for your time today.
Yeah,
Enjoyed the
delighted to be here.
Thank you.
Needless to say, Reverend King was a visionary and a dreamer. He articulated a view of society that was distinctly different and imaginative way back in the 60s. While political equality, the ability to participate as a full member of society and in a participative, representative democracy was his primary aim, which he accomplished. His second goal, sadly, is often forgotten. In his final years, he was actively focused on poverty. He was building a coalition, Indian tribes, coal miners, poor blacks, and planning a poverty march in Washington. Unfortunately, this was not to be. We know that representative democracy is not a guarantee of poverty reduction or poverty alleviation. Katrina once more showed us the face of poverty in this country. But poverty exists around the world. It is poverty that we must fight. Poverty is the silence that we must break. So this is my topic for today. And I'm going to talk today about a point of view on how to democratize commerce. Not just democratize the political process, but how to democratize commerce so every human being has an equal chance to participate in the benefits of globalization. If 20th century was focused on political freedom, from colonialism, communism, racism to representative democracy, and it's still work in process, and we all know it's not done. But the wheels are in motion and the trend cannot be reversed. Therefore, it is time for us to think about what is next. So I believe that the 21st century will all be about economic freedom. We must focus on how to democratize commerce. That means we have to start with a very simple premise, exactly the simple premise that Dr. King started his civil rights with. It was not a complex premise at all. It was very simple and very telling. To me, the simple premise is every person in the world, not just in the United States, every person in the world to have access to the benefits of the global economy. Now, what does it mean in an operational sense? It means that every person must be first treated as a consumer. For those of you from the business school, and I can see a lot of faces in the business school, most companies focus on the top 1 billion people. 5 billion people around the world, or 80% of humanity, has been below the radar screen. So when I say every person is a consumer, how do we start treating poor not as wards of state, not as people who have to be taken care of by civil society, but legitimately as a consumer? I use the word consumer because not that I think consumption is the only way to get the benefits of global economy, but consumers always get respect and they have choice. So respect, dignity, and choice or the organizing idea behind treating everybody as a consumer. That means we have to make sure everybody in the world can afford world-class products and services. Not a light version, not a downgraded version of what you and I have, but exactly the same, but at prices that they can afford. And number two, and that it applies to all of us, including us here, that we need to have the ability to shape our own experiences rather than be shaped by large companies. What do I mean? Instead of an institutional view of the individual, I would like to suggest we have to move to an individual-centric view of large institutions, be it government or be it the large global company. So that is just using every person as a consumer, treating everybody as a consumer. But that is not enough. Everybody should have the right to access global markets and be treated fairly as a producer, provided fair wages for their skills, for their knowledge, and their effort. So how do we convert 6 billion people, 5 billion of them are not part of the global economy, to become both consumers, therefore they can afford consumption of the same goods and services, the same quality that you and I have, and at the same time get fairness in the way they get treated as producers of product and services. This may appear to be a very utopian dream. I'm afraid it is not. The building blocks that are required to make this dream a reality is already taking shape around the world. And what I want to illustrate with some examples is that this is not a dream too far out. It is easy for us to make it happen in your lifetime, if not in mine, if you are determined to do it. The first thing that we have to do then is to include 5 billion poor in the market economy, both as consumers and producers. That means the bottom of the pyramid must be treated as a market with the disciplines of the market economy. The market economy is not unfair. It is very fair because it is transparent. We have to make sure that the markets work. Whenever you have distortions, it is because the market does not work and somebody is distorting the market economy. So my own work, which is called The Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid, was looking at how to create an inclusive capitalism and includes 5 billion people. There is an other side. Consumers must be able to shape their own experiences. If you look at what is happening today, the consumers are not equally powerful compared to the large company. The question is, how do you shape a world where consumers are equally influential? And those of you who are young here and who spend some of your time playing video games know that without consumers and consumer communities, there is no video game market. The question is, why can't we have the same influence in everything we buy? Therefore, we have the ability to shape our own experiences. And how do we co-create value? Use consumers as joint problem solvers, not as passive recipients of what the large company produces. And that is the substance of the other book that I wrote 2 years ago, co-wrote with Venkat Ramaswamy, called The Future of Competition.
Hello, everyone. That was great listening to C.K. Prahlad again. On behalf of the MIC 2022 team, I would like to thank everyone who joined us today. Who would have thought and imagined that a couple of years back that India would have so many digital startups today? But it was really eye-opening to get the perspective of the leaders themselves. Now, in the next set of speaker series, we have Ms. Rekha Taluri, CFO of Microsoft India. Rekha is the Chief Financial Officer of Microsoft India and is responsible for leading Microsoft India's overall finance organization. She oversees growth enablement, resource prioritization, strategic planning, and risk management. Rekha joined Microsoft in 2007 and held various roles across different business units in North America, India, and the Middle East and Africa regions. Prior to this role, she was the finance director of Microsoft Middle East and Africa operations, leading a diverse team responsible for commercial business and enabling business and finance transformation across 70 countries in the region. Before joining Microsoft, she worked in public accounting in Detroit, Michigan, and Hindustan Petroleum Corporation, India. She holds an MBA from Stephen M. Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan. Welcome, Ms. Kaduri.
Joining us at the Fireside chat, we have a new panelist, Mr. Anshuman Das. Anshuman is also a Ross alum and is currently a digital transformation lead at Amazon Web Services. He has over 19 years of business transformation and consulting experience, playing leadership roles in business process design, intelligent automation, cloud strategy, and business development. Anshuman will be accompanied by our co-chairs and current executive MBA students, Suman and Anviti. Now I would request the panelists and our guest speakers to take over the stage for yet another enlightening session.
Rekha, it's a pleasure to see you here and welcome back to the University of Michigan. For those in the audience, as already mentioned in her introduction, Rekha is one of the illustrious alums from the Ross School of Business. Rekha, you've paved a very successful path for yourself after graduating from Ross. I'm sure there were several inflection points along the way. We would love to hear about your journey since your time at Ross.
First of all, Anviti and University of Michigan, it's fantastic to be with the Ross School of Business and be part of this conference today. It's been almost 15 years since I graduated from University of Michigan, and I should say that Ross has provided the biggest platform for me. When I was in the business school, it has actually opened up a number of doors, right? A number of doors, and learning for me has been a fantastic experience because it's completely like, back in those days, true to its philosophy, it's co-learning from your fellow students, co-learning not just what happens in the classroom, but what's happening around it, right? The number of resources that were out there were fantastic. There's a lot of lecture series, and there are some of the best classes that I had were around organizational and behavior, and a lot of action-based learning. And that is what differentiated Ross from the rest of the programs we probably had, and something that I had actually taken into the corporate world in the last 15 years, right? My journey with Microsoft, it's been phenomenal. I couldn't have asked for a better post-MBA career, I would say, because it's also something that I'm, very dear to in terms of, the culture of the company and the mission statement, right? How you can enable every person and every organization on the planet to do more. That's very deep in its to its core. The reason why I say this is, that's something that I truly believe in, working as part of this company, that we can impact and influence the $7+ billion people and all the organizations on the planet. And that's something that we've been doing. At least I feel very empowered being part of this company and being able to have that influence across, right? And it's also a journey that, at Microsoft, you own your career. So that's something that, I have been like, super clear when I was coming out of B school. Hey, I wanted to work for a global company, which provided me this platform to experience different things across the globe. And while I started in the US subsidiary of Microsoft, and I was super clear that at some point I want to go back to India. India at that time was, the economy was booming. There's so much happening. And even to this date, there's never a dull moment in a country like India. And there's a lot that the things have changed and evolved in the last 10 years. It's been a decade since I moved back from the US, and there's always a lot that you learn, and how the economy has been leading in, if you see what's happening in the last couple of years, we are on our way to be the third largest economy very soon, and there's a lot going on there.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rekha. It's great to hear about your journey and how Ross was able to become that launch pad for such a wonderful career, and just looking forward to how this grows, how your career grows and goes from here as well. I mean, it's fantastic. Anshuman?
Yeah, thank you, Anviti. Rekha, welcome to this fireside chat. It's my pleasure to host you, and also my pleasure to host with Anviti and Suman as a co-host here. So thank you, everyone. And hello, everyone, from wherever you are joining in this fire chat. So, it was very exciting when you were sharing your journey so far, Rekha. But I would like to take you to talk about the digital transformation journey in India. So if you can share your thoughts on how have you seen the digital transformation journey in India evolve in the last few years, especially during the pandemic? So if you can share your thoughts around that.
No, I think it's a fantastic question, Anshuman. If you look at some of the digital headlines for India, you think about 1.4 billion population. Today, 80% of the users in India, they have mobile. And we also have, out of that 1.4 plus billion, 95% today have a digital identity. And this is something, we've been on this journey, with the introduction of Aadhaar. And that has been, the fastest probably in a 5 to 6 years, we have reached this, right? Having a digital identity. And on the top of that, we also have 47% of our population, they use internet in some form or fashion. And if you think about it, probably we have one of the cheapest and most accessible internet data plans in the world, right? And that has enabled the economy to be disrupted, and the very fact that people are able to access internet, that's a huge number. And then a third of the population are also active social users. These are certain metrics, right? And when you think about what has happened in the past couple of years, the digital maturity of enterprises across India has also increased a lot. And the pandemic has actually accelerated the journey in terms of digitization. There are several things that happen, right? And several different players, all the way from what government is doing, what large enterprises are doing. And India, if you think about, is the small and medium businesses are the backbone of the country. We have over 60 plus million medium and small enterprises. Then this startup ecosystem that is disrupting the digitalization of the economy. And most importantly, consumer is actually demanding a lot more, right? If there's one thing that happened in the pandemic in the last 2 years, it's about what the consumer has driven in terms of how they want to access, where they want to interact and all of that. So these are some of the key pillars in terms of the role that each one of these are playing in terms of the digitalization. And when you think about what has happened in it took us almost like 60 plus years to get to a trillion economy, 1 trillion in terms of economy. And what happened in the last few years is like getting from that 1 trillion to $3 trillion economy, and we're on our path to the 5 trillion economy. This has been possible by of course there's globalization and all of that, but a big part of it also has been driven by digitalization and what digital transformation is doing to these industries. And during the pandemic, we have seen existing companies disrupt their own business models. They have been creating new business models. They have also come up with the new ways of accessing their consumer base. Whether it is manufacturing, they are thinking about how do we combine a combination of automation plus human capital. And if you think about what happened with the retail market, across healthcare has completely disrupted. Across all industries, we have seen disruption happening.
Thank you so much. I'm very thankful that I asked this question to you. I mean, this whole mind-blowing metrics you share, 95% digital identity, and in 5 to 6 years, 47% people use internet, and then the trillion-dollar economy which we spoke about India is chasing. So that's amazing metrics, and I think that takes me to the next question, which is I'm very curious, and I would like to deep dive with you to understand a couple of things, and which is again around digital transformation journey, and how is Indian government playing enabling that. So I would like to hear from you around Indian journey towards this $5 trillion economy. That is number one, and at the same time, how you think Professor Prahlad's bottom of the pyramid approach is being followed while India is going through this journey. If you could share your thoughts around that.
Yeah. No, first and foremost, the whole concept of digital India, it is centered around inclusive growth and social in terms of, how we think about it, right? The mission and the vision of digital India is also like, threefold. I would say having that digital infrastructure as a core utility for every citizen. And then there's governance in terms of, how we think about services on demand for the citizens of India, right? And then digitally empowering citizens. And if you think about it, this has been a very big initiative created by the government in the past couple of years, almost a decade plus. And across multiple, I would say, ministries and things that, there are 9 different pillars, that the government has been looking at. But at the core of this has also been something called India Stack. While, it is called India Stack, it's actually, something that any developed or even emerging economies can also use, right? And this concept of India Stack is also it's based on 3 different layers. The first of it is also identity layer. And we talked about it a little bit in terms of, the role that Aadhaar has played in terms of, creating, while it's just, we may think of it as like, it's a unique identification number, similar to what we may find in other parts of the world. The role that Aadhaar has played is a lot more. We sometimes underestimate, what it has done to this nation, right? Today, we are thinking about, there's almost 1.3 billion people who are on, who have a digital identity. When I say it's not just a card, but they have a digital identity, which means this has enabled a lot more for the people and the citizens. It has actually helped us create, if you think about it, back in probably 2009 something, less than 17% of India's population had a bank account or access to a bank account. Today, we have close to 500 million people having some kind of access to financial institutions, Jan Dhan accounts, access to banks and having a bank account. This is what Aadhaar has enabled. It has simplified, the process of verifying customers, know your customer, these kind of things, creating that identity. And it not only helped us get so many people have a financial inclusion in the society. Second thing, what Aadhaar has also done is also think about when somebody wants to get, let's say, a mobile connection. Usually it would have taken many weeks, before people had Aadhaar to verify who you are and, do I need to actually, can I give you a connection or not? But the number of mobile users that we have created, like I said, there's so many mobile users, and this is what the Aadhaar has done, creating the number of mobile users as well as bringing them into an internet society, bringing them into a financially inclusive society. So that, to your point, to Prahlad's vision in terms of, bottom of the pyramid, how do we include more and more people, and how do we actually grow an economy that is inclusive of everyone? This has enabled, two very important things that have accelerated the economy in general, right? That's point number one. Second thing, there's then on the India stack, the second layer that we also have is something called payment layer. UPI has been very disruptive for India. And if you see the number of transactions today that are happening, unbelievable, almost like, 2 billion transactions per month, something, it's probably like, the largest payment systems that we have. What it has enabled is not only creating, the ease of transacting, the ease of removing the overhead costs of transacting, the mobile payments. And in fact, pandemic has accelerated this, right? It has made it more cashless society, paymentless, paperless, all of that. So that's, the payment. And today we have over 300 plus banks, who have this UPI capability and all, right? So that's the second layer. Then there is the third layer. Still we are, this is the data layer. This is where, like, as a user, I get to say, like, how do I want to use my data? Whom do I give access to this? Whether the concept of, like, DigiLockers, these kind of things, driving licenses, all of that. We're still on that process of unlocking the potential of the third layer of digital things, and this will help us accelerate our journey. And there are various things that we can do with, the health care stack and all of that, that can help us enable.
This is amazing. So much, so insightful. Thanks for sharing. I think you were bang on with the data that you were talking about, how India is going towards a 5 trillion economy going forward. And I can follow in Professor Prahlad's bottom of the pyramid approach, giving the power to the consumers. So thanks for sharing that information. With that, I would like to hand over to Anviti. Anviti, please take it forward.
Absolutely. Thank you, Anshuman. Rekha, very insightful. And that was like looking at one aspect of this, right? The government and the stakeholders and this whole economy. If we see the way India has done business over the years has changed so much over the years. It started with, after independence, we had these big corporations coming in, the Tata and the Birla and Reliance, and so many big corporations came. Then we had the, the foreign partnerships that came in. There was a phase of that. We had these, the globalization of business in India with all these global companies coming in. And now we have these startups, this whole era of startups in India. How has that changed the face of business in India today?
No, I think it's a fantastic question. Like I said, India has always been a land of small and medium businesses, and this is what startup ecosystem for us is, right? Now we have a lot of unicorns also, but historically, like it's a land of entrepreneurship. It's a land where you have a lot of what you have seen in the past couple of years is there's a good amount of rise of consumerism, right? Consumerization of India, where the consumers are demanding a lot. And that's where, like, startups have played a huge role in terms of, coming up with these new models, creating, a lot of opportunities. And when you look at, today, the startup ecosystem in India, we are amongst the third. There's probably like 65,000 plus active startups, maybe, 12,000 plus or good, sizable number, right? That we have. And in the last year alone, 2021, we have added 40 plus unicorns. And today we have 80 unicorns. And we also have a lot of Sonicorns. Unicorns, very soon, they will become unicorns as well. And when you look at we are number 3 after US and China. And this was not the case a couple of years back, right? And that's what we are seeing in the past couple of years, the advent and how these are getting accelerated. And it's across various industries. And couple of other things that we're also noticing in the past couple of years, right? Earlier, we used to have some of these startups in hub cities. Now we are actually seeing a lot of them, there's diffusion of startups across India to tier 2, tier 3 cities, across many parts, which of the country, which you wouldn't have imagined a couple of years back. And it's also across industries. Earlier set of startups used to be a lot in services. And they were also following, hey, there is something that happened elsewhere in the world, we would quickly replicate, right? Now it's very innovative. We're seeing a lot of product related startups across multiple industries as well, whether it is deep tech. We're seeing a lot of startups using deep technology, artificial intelligence, IoT, blockchain kind of technology. And on the top of that, we're also seeing ed tech, fintech, HR, even in supply chain, it's across multiple sectors we are seeing these things. And it continues to be a very vibrant space for us. And as in many startup, there's second generation startups or third generation startups are getting created on a daily basis, right? So it is actually changing how fast we're able to digitalize in the economy. And also, not only that, I would say and a lot of these startups are no longer to serve India market. It's also to serve global markets, right? This is the shift that we are seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's great to see that there's such a big picture version of this. It's not limited in any form or manner. It's of course, it's the entrepreneur mindset, and so many people who are coming with it. The generation itself is very entrepreneurial by nature. So it's fantastic to see the upcoming generation working on this. There are so many stakeholders that play such a crucial role in this entire ecosystem, and I want to understand how the GCC landscape has an influence in this space.
No, this one I think is it's super important role that GCCs are playing, right? Today, if you think about it, we have anywhere between 1,400 plus GCCs in India. And these are, initially they must have started as, just as wage arbitrage. But today the roles and how these GCCs have evolved is, phenomenal. They are no longer just wage arbitrage, but they have, impacted the economy in a very different way. Couple of things, right? One, the sheer employment opportunities that GCCs are creating. That's humongous in terms of we probably have 1.3 million people today employed by these global centers, innovation centers, right? Second thing, the amount that they're actually contributing to the economy, $40+ billion of contribution to the economy. Then there is also, what we are seeing is that, the GCCs are also evolving in terms of across on the ladder, the ladder in terms of, how they're driving innovation for the world, right? Earlier, like I said, it was just with cost arbitrage, but now there's more and more innovation that is coming out of GCCs. And what it does is also digitally transforming the nation, because it also helps us bring some of the best practices from whichever countries these GCCs are coming from, headquarters, and it's bringing them best practices to India. Plus, it's also helping us, in some of the a lot of the companies, it's probably India is their second largest, R&D base outside of their headquarter location, right? That's another point. And then, on the top of that, what we are also seeing is, they are also creating in some of the companies, they are owning that end-to-end P&L in terms of R&D. So there's a huge, massive shift in terms of how the GCCs are being seen. They also create, India as a talent hub for their global organizations, and also creating the next generation leaders, right?
Absolutely. And it's fantastic to see that now this all these startups and all these entrepreneurs, in fact, anybody who's getting involved with this is able to recognize India as a differentiator in terms of the value it delivers, not just the cost differentiation, So that's a fantastic point.
Yeah, and I would also want to add that, what the GCCs also have been doing, a lot of the global innovation centers, they also have, they incubate some of the startups, or they are actually mentoring or driving some of these startups, as they think about their own R&D and innovation as well, right? They have a huge role to play in the startup ecosystem. And you see that, a lot of the startup founders and, the talent is also coming from some of these global companies. The tech talent has been like, learning, bringing their own best practices that they have learned in some of these, creating and fueling our startup ecosystem.
Yeah, and such a strong partnership, to be able to leverage the speed and the agility of these startups and the experience and the advisory that comes from these GCCs. So what an excellent partnership to take us into the future. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Rekha. Suman, do you have?
And Rekha, as I was just listening to the whole conversation, and one of the thing right now, India is everywhere you see the digital India, the term comes up. Like the whole digitalization is happening, and probably COVID has make it more faster because people who are not used to use digital stuff in regular life, they also has been somehow forced to start getting to that board of digital India. How IT and ITES, IT-enabled services, is working to make this digital India?
No, I think, Suman, if you think about it, the whole journey has started off with India being, an outsourced nation, with IT services and BPO services leading the charter for us, right? This was almost like, wave one for us, maybe like, back in the 1980s when Patni Solutions, has been created, and then came like, the Infis of the world, and how this entire journey has started. And what happened after that is very magical for a country like India, because what did it create? Like, it created a lot of talent, tech talent in the country, which also meant like, we invested a lot in terms of, I would say almost, our universities and, colleges have been creating this, the curriculum that enabled us to be the hub for technology. And along came, when these IT services, a lot of the work back then when they were doing was also export oriented. And this also has brought a lot of, I would say, a lot of income to the middle class of India. And this, what it did was, it has helped the spending capability of consumers. You see the direct impact and the indirect impact. They have made the India as a technology hub, creating a lot of technical talent. Second, there is a rise of consumerization, indirect impact, which has also funneled, some of the digital advances and technology, because consumers today are, demanding a lot. And on the top of this, today, if you see where we are from IT services company, it's no longer just outsource model, but today they are strategic partners for a lot of our global companies, the Fortune 500 companies, where they are able to help them to digitally transform. And they are actually, if you think about it, it's no longer just, those contracts, but they are taking that end to end and driving digital transformation for those companies. And this is the role that, IT services has been playing. And most importantly, today, when you look at, their contribution to the growth, it's close to 10% plus of Indian economy is driven by these companies. And it's what we miss out is that, the impact that they are creating on local economy, right? More and more of our, large enterprises in India, they are actually consuming a lot of the services that these IT services have been creating as well. So it's not just the impact that they're creating for global Fortune 500 companies, but also the impact that they are creating for at a local level, whether it is working with the public sector or even with the large enterprises in India. So there is that impact that they are creating as well. Like I said, they contribute to almost close to 10% of the economy.
Yeah, that's a very nice way of explaining. And as you were saying, India, the startups are booming. And India as a product nation, how this whole startup ecosystem is changing from the how we started, as you said, 20, 30 years back with Patni, Infosys, and now, right now, India as a product nation, how this whole thing is changing.
No, like I said, the earlier startups were all, a lot of service oriented startups. And then, of course, there are niche markets that they were playing. But today, when you think about it, like I said, there are a lot of startups using deep technology. You think about, some of the startups which are actually creating products, taking global, whether it is Zoho, Freshworks, or you think about Ola or the Oyas of the world. They are a lot more than being an Indian company in an Indian market, but it's also more and more of them going global, right? So that's something that that we are also seeing, and we have also seen the rate at which they are able to add their users, whether it is, I think Postman or, some of these companies, Freshworks, they have achieved like, 100 million plus, monthly run rate, the MRR kind of stuff, right? Very quickly that they are able to reach to that thing. So these are certain things, where the SaaS market is, companies are getting to more global market, and they are sitting here in India and serving a lot of global companies as well.
Yeah, and on this, because all of us, like Anshuman, me, and Anvit is product of the whole Indian school system and all focused on technology, and we are technologists right now. But things are changing. When we are growing up, it was more like Hyderabad, Kolkata, Chennai, and big cities, Mumbai. So there's a very interesting question from the audience, like how this is now moving to the tier 2, tier 3 cities, how those cities are coming up, the whole startups, the new companies, and how global companies are also expanding to tier 2 and tier 3 cities.
I think it's a beautiful question, because there are there are ecosystems that are evolving that help the growth of startups, right? Whether it is like academia, corporates, technology platforms, government, and we also see investors, right? Like I shared before, we have the trends that we are seeing is no longer are startups they are confined to the tier 1 cities. Today we are seeing more and more of them getting diffused into tier 2 cities and tier 3 cities. Yes, probably not, as much as we would love to, but, that's the direction in which we are going, right? We also have, when you think about it, 170 plus incubators and 70 accelerators that we have that are, helping us fuel some of these growths that we are seeing. And if you think about it, there are a lot of ecosystem bodies like, NASCOM, ASCOM, and, CCI, these are also helping this entire journey of the startups.
That's the good to know it's now spreading to all other tier 2 and tier 3 cities. The talents are coming up, and it's the true
and we
digital.
also had a startup day that the government has just started, from an India perspective. So there's a lot that is happening, Suman.
Yeah. Anshuman, I know you have follow-up questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Suman. You know what? The more we spend time with Rekha, we get so enlightened, and it is so nice to keep listening more about information and sharing, especially those metrics. I mean, those are mind-blowing. I mean, you shared a series of some metrics, which I think I have taken a note of it, and I definitely would love to use them in future. But thanks for sharing. So as we get close to this fire chat, and what we would like to know from you, or maybe it's more of a guidance that we as students or alumni or the emerging leaders from Michigan, how we can give back or contribute to this evolving market. What do you think? What kind of role do you think we can play?
No, I think, Anshuman, fantastic question. In fact, Michigan has historically, they have been a platform where they were promoting entrepreneurship, right? Whether it is the Zelluri Institute of Entrepreneurship, we had, a lot of our batchmates, who have been able to use that as a platform to create their own very successful startups. In fact, one of my batchmates, she created this startup, K-12 Elevate, super successful. And, this was with the help of the Zelluri Institute and the platform that Michigan has opened up. And that's something that, as I'm sure, they have probably helped a number of startups to open up their doors, making the right connections, and providing that platform and network, right? So that's number one. Second thing, I think, a lot of the startups, what we see is they're also looking for guidance and coaching. This is super important for them, particularly when they are at very early stage. In terms of, how they're able to, what's the direction. A lot of them probably don't even know how to prepare a business plan. They have this idea and they have the right energy and passion to open to create new things, but they probably do not have the experience or the ability to create some of these things, right? That's where I think a lot of us who have been working in the corporate world could help mentor them or coach them, be part of, maybe be on some of their advisory boards or something to help them in their journey as they, create their own wings to take off.
Wow, that's exciting. It sounds like a Michigan form of Shark Tank. Yeah, definitely. I think those are very insightful, and thanks for sharing. With that, I would like to hand it over to Sankhya, and Sankhya, please take it over from here.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Anshuman.
Thanks, Anshuman. That was indeed a great session. Thank you, Ms. Rekha, for such an insightful session. So on behalf of the Michigan India Conference 2022 team, once again, we would like to thank everyone who could join us virtually today and listen to these impressive speakers. So thank you, Mr. Soni, Mr. Navani, and Mr. Luri for your time. Before closing day 2, we would like to share the theme for day 3 on 21st April 2022. We have leading thought leaders lined up for the session, and we will have discussions related to finance and healthcare. Please follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and other social media platforms to stay updated. Hope you all have a great day, great evening, and an awesome weekend. Take care and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Rekha, thank you. That was a very insightful session, very illuminating, and I'm sure everybody listening took a lot away from it. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
So much, Rekha. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.